It's a significant event, and it will be for Mr. Bannon. A referral like this, this particular statute is a misdemeanor statute. The jail time is between 1 month and 1 year, and there are some financial fines involved as well, but it is significant.
So Bannon's attorney said last week here that he was just following instructions from Mr. Trump's attorney. What is the argument from Bannon's legal team, and do you think it has legal standing?
Right. So in other cases where someone who is making a claim of executive privilege, that's what's at issue here. As the reporting has it that former President Trump has directed Mr. Bannon and others to exert executive privilege and perhaps other privileges as an excuse, as a defense to having to testify before Congress. So that's what I expect to see as a defense by Mr. Bannon if and when this referral goes across to the Justice Department. The rub here is that a claim by a former president as to executive privilege is one that it does not enjoy wide support among the scholars who study and who describe and think about executive privilege. The mainstream thought about this is that it's a privilege that runs to the office of the presidency, and the current president effectively is the custodian of the privilege. Here, President Biden has chosen or determined that it is not in the interest of the United States to assert an executive privilege for any conversations that Mr. Bannon may have had relating to the January 6th inquiry with former President Trump, whether or not a court, or at least in the first instance, the Justice Department, would agree that that is a valid assertion of the privilege is something that we'll have to look for and wait to see.
And then, of course, there is the complicating factor that Mr. Bannon was not, a member of the administration during the date in question and during the time that this committee would like to question him about, correct?
Correct. There have been a few relatively recent examples of administration officials being referred for a potential criminal prosecution for contempt of Congress. And in those circumstances where it was a current official who was asserting an executive privilege claim on behalf of the current president, the Justice Department has taken the position that it would not go forward with the prosecution. But the facts are different here. We have a former official claiming the privilege on behalf of a former president. And so we will simply have to watch for these developments and see what will happen.
Karen,
in my opinion, I think...
Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to point out that it is official. We knew the vote would end this way, but it is official now that the House of Representatives is finding Steve Bannon in contempt of Congress. So, Keir, finally, what implications could this now have on other former advisors of Mr. Trump's?
Right. So mostly it'll have a deterrent effect. I mean, this is an escalation from recent efforts to enforce subpoenas that have wound their way through the courts, moving to the criminal arena.
Rise.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Representative McMorris-Rodgers, pursuant to House Res 8, I inform the House that Representative McMorris-Rodgers will vote no on H Res 730.
Tanya, are we still going?
Yes, we are still going, Keir. We just had a little audio blip there for a moment.
All right, so the implications then are deterrence for others. This is an escalation. Up to a year in jail is significant. Hopefully that will encourage others. The fly in the ointment here is that if the Congress proceeds purely with a criminal referral for Mr. Bannon, once he's convicted, if he is convicted, be careful to say if he is convicted after presenting his defenses, his incentive to perhaps change his mind and cooperate and give testimony and turn over documents, if that were to happen, it wouldn't likely have a direct effect on his conviction. He would remain convicted.
Right.
Other remedies that the Congress seeks, like a civil enforcement action in court that leads to a civil contempt, would allow a contemnor like Mr. Bannon, alleged to be here, to change his mind and basically purge himself of his contempt by cooperating. And similarly, if the House were to act on its own inherent authority, which it hasn't done for decades, and arrest Mr. Bannon directly, he would be able, were he to, from the congressional hoosegow, decide to cooperate, would be able to make a plea to purge himself of the contempt and seek his release. Once a criminal conviction is in place, it becomes that the incentives for cooperation are substantially reduced.
All right. Well, Keir Dugal, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your legal insight. Once again, the House of Representatives has voted to hold Steve Bannon in criminal contempt for not complying with the subpoena. Thanks so much, Keir Dugal.
Thank you, Tanya.
Attorney General Merrick Garland is testifying before the House Judiciary Committee today. He was asked about the January 6th committee's recommendation to hold Steve Bannon in contempt. Here's what he said the Justice Department will do.
The House of Representatives votes for referral of a contempt charge. The Department of Justice will do what it always does in such circumstances. It will apply the facts and the law and make a decision consistent with the principles of prosecution.
Garland also called the January 6th attack a, quote, intolerable assault. A CDC advisory committee is expected to vote today on booster shots for the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The FDA authorized the boosters for certain populations on Wednesday. If the CDC committee approves them today, they could be available to the public as soon as Friday. Simultaneously, the White House is preparing for the Pfizer vaccine to get FDA approval for children ages 5 to 11 as soon as November. CBS News' Deborah Alfarone reports from the White House.
CDC advisors met Thursday ahead of a vote on boosters, a day after the FDA authorized extra doses for millions of Americans who received the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines.
CDC's recommendations will not just address who should receive a booster dose, but also include what vaccine they should receive, how, and when.
The FDA gave the go-ahead for everyone age 18 and older who got the Johnson